Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position along with your favorite beverage to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Mike P. at U308 Uranium, Ryan S. at Pigs Apple 113320, and at Shiny Rokes. On the program today is a returning guest. Jim Sykes is back with us. Jim is the president and CEO of Baselode Energy. The company is focused on uranium exploration in the Athabasca Basin, including advancing the Hook Ackio project, which is in the early stages of discovery. The company also has other exploration projects in the eastern and southeastern side of the Athabasca Basin. Baselode Energy is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol FIND, as well as on the US OTC markets under the symbol BSENF. Jim, good to have you back on the program.
Always happy to be here, Andrew.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. And it's been I just looked, been about a year since you've come on the podcast, pretty close or just after 1 year here. So good to have you back. Before we get on the company specifics here in just a moment, I just wanted to get your take, Jim, on where we stand as far as market conditions out there for juniors, sentiment, and any other comments you have broadly on the markets.
Honestly, I think the markets are hurting right now for the juniors. I think that's visible across the board, not just the uranium space, but there seems to be a lot of distressed companies out there, and a lot of companies can put out some really good news and just have no traction on that. I can't blame markets for their hesitancy to participate in investments right now, especially given all of the market scenarios that are going on globally. It's a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, and so people are just properly holding on to cash. The uranium space, I think, is a little bit different. We've been traded down quite heavily, especially the juniors. I think there's mixed message in there because from what I see and from what I hear, everything is extremely healthy in the uranium side of things, and that's really visible when you look at the contract price and compare it to the spot price. Contract prices are doing excellent; they're well up there. The spot price is down, yes, but the spot price, even though it's probably the most watched from the retail side, it is the least definitive of what goes on in the uranium space and what's being sold out there. Just the contract prices, the contracts are being made, and they're going from miner exclusively to end user. That's the uranium cycle. That's what it's all about. It's not about dumping into the spot market. So seeing those contract prices remain high and elevated, and all of the back end conversion and enrichment prices remaining high means this is a healthy market. It's a great time now for investors to get into, I believe, despite the global chaos we're seeing and the uncertainty, but things are low right now. And I think it's only a matter of time before we see a stronger push, not from the retail side, but just from the utility side, that we're going to see more pushes and more demand coming down the road. And the current supply demand imbalance will have a larger effect. And I think we'll see some more price movement down the road, hopefully within the next 12 to 24 months. That alone, I do hope, encourages investors to come back into the market.
Folks have to, first of all, understand some of the broad market factors here that are playing into this, and how sentiment's running in the uranium sector. Then, of course, the S&D stuff, understand where we stand there. Based on that information, it makes sense. Definitely, you have to have at least one foot in the door, so to speak. But capital is also going to be important here as we sort out some of these issues that indirectly impact the uranium market. Then, of course, utilities. And once we get sorted on some of these issues that they're waiting on, some of them, I do think we'll have a resumption here at some point. And it's good to have these corrections as well. By this time, anybody who's been in the uranium market should well understand the corrective nature of this cycle, and we've certainly had a number of corrections over the years in an overall uptrend. We'll see how that goes and keep an eye out for really good deals that are out there in the market as well. And I think you have to kind of take those different things and plan a strategy that works. But You definitely have to remain patient. You definitely have to remain solvent. And those are the two key things that I think folks have to pretty much learn on their own. I think at this point, you can tell people till you blue in the face, but till they actually get the experience themselves, it's a hard one to convey. Let's move on here. Let's get into company specifics, because I think that company specific updates during these market times, and of course, some of those successes hopefully will result and hopefully drive some of the individual company success. Let's go back to, maybe not all the way back a year, but let's go back a few months here to September and October of 2024. Company had a number of news releases. Just talk a little bit about the drill results coming out of the Ackio zone drilling that was happening during that time, the assay results received so far from that last drilling program, Jim, as well as potential new targets identified nearby, especially with the clay alteration findings from late September.
Everybody wants to know about the assays. No, rightfully so. Again, it's kind of ridiculous that we're so behind schedule on this. Uh, okay, so a number of questions there. I'll kind of jump back and maybe do a full year-end recap, just because you did mention it's been a year, and we can do that quickly. We started out last year with a very healthy exploration budget, about $12 million, and we had plans to drill three of our projects: Bear, Catharsis, and Hook, which was divided into Ackio and regional exploration. We executed the Catharsis project right as the first one in February and March, and I think the results are very exciting. We haven't done a follow up, but we're waiting for the rest of our Hook results to come out to do a year end wrap up, which would highlight the successes that we've seen out of Catharsis. We have some immediate follow ups, one of which I would say looks like an arrow target to me, just requires more drilling, and it's within a 5 kilometer long trend that we've defined as very structural in nature. The system has carried the right alteration fluids. It's carried the oxidized fluids that have uranium with them. Very encouraging signs to see initially on a first pass drill program. Now we have to just refine our targets. Similarly, when we went to the Bear project, we saw the same things. Popped 10 drill holes into the Bear area for first time targets in some of those. And again, similar results where we're seeing wonderful clay alteration that is reminiscent of a basement style of alteration. What we do believe is that this anomaly that we chased, although it has the right looking characteristics, it was not the strongest that we saw geochemically. And when we follow this trend to the west, everything was getting stronger, and there's a larger anomaly to the west. We just didn't have gravity over it, so now we have to go back and do some ground gravity in that western area, which again, we've got about 5 kilometers in that direction for further investigation and exploration. If that's where the real structure is, then that's where the potential is. But the fluids look like they're there as well on Bear, just we would be further removed on the halo of things. So then we hopped into the Hook exploration project in June, and again we divided that into Ackio drilling and the Hook exploration drilling, the regional exploration, which we targeted I think 5-6 different target areas based on overlapping geophysical signatures. Starting with Ackio, very successful on there. We were drilling off some of the pods that had very limited drilling, so we wanted to define some of those areas, and that was one of the first areas that we drilled with holes 117 to 119. We drilled our pod 6, and I think some of the results out there are quite exceptional. 8.5 meters at 0.6%. The other drill hole 21 meters at 0.3%. So good grades, good widths. Then we took a break from mineralization and took on an endeavor of trying to find the next pod within the Ackio system. So we looked in the sandstone. We looked for an unconformity style of mineralization, which was a very high target concept in our exploration portfolio, because unconformity style of mineralization is where you get the really high grades. You can 15%, 20%, 80% uranium, no problem. Seen that many times. Unfortunately, we didn't hit success in those. We didn't find an unconformity deposit, but that's not uncommon with strictly basement hosted deposits. We're just hoping to have that other bit there. We looked down dip and we looked on strike, and honestly, we didn't hit big successes. We still need to see some of the chemistry from those holes, which is still waiting on the assays, and this is 6 months down the road, to see if there are any other pathfinders within there that would help us determine if this is the right structure, the right fluid pathway that may have moved mineralization further along that system. As typical for Athabasca uranium, they occur in pods. You can get these 100-meter to 500-meter or even a kilometer distant pods that are removed from each other and not always connected. It's not always just this big, huge one single pod. They're quite often pearls on a string with dead zones in between. And that's the approach that we have to take with this. And so we have to look at a lot of the chemistry and put our exploration hats on, even when we're drilling within mineralization, as weird as that is. Just again, looking for that next pod. We haven't found it yet. We do believe that it does exist. And then we finish off drilling in our pod 7 area, which did not have a lot of drill density to it. And what we had discovered by the end of the year previously, we were starting to see thicker and higher grade intercepts. So we put more of a focus last year on those as well. However, those were more towards the end of our Ackio drill season, and those are the drill holes that we're waiting on from the lab. So we've got partial results from some of those holes, so we know that those assay results should be imminent based on these new timescales. Oh God, who knows how long that really means, but they should be received hopefully soon. So while we're on the topic of the labs, just very quickly, we're still waiting on 29% of all of the samples that we submitted with the lab. So 29% of all the samples, we're waiting on results from those. And again, most of those are the holes towards the end of the Ackio drill program and the regional program, where they were drilled in August and September. So we haven't got those results back. We are currently, 25 to 28 weeks off from when we dropped the samples off. That is 6 months from when we dropped off the samples, and we still don't have results. Very uncharacteristic of this lab. I've never seen anything like this in my career, and I've been dealing with this lab since 2006. They've historically been 5 to 8 week turnaround. That was even the case up until August of last year. So Bear results came back on time. Catharsis results came back on time. Holes 117 to 119, they came back within that 5 to 8 week turnaround time. But then something happened in September, and everything just went chaotic, and we stopped receiving results for a number of weeks, months even. I followed up with the lab a few times, and quite often emails or calls went unanswered. But from what I was initially made aware of, the lack in turnaround time, it's not just specific to Baselode. Actually, it's not even specific to this lab alone. From what I know of other companies and other industries in other provinces, they're also suffering from delayed lab turnaround times. And honestly, I think that has everything to do with acid consumption. I'll touch on that briefly. Even in the uranium space, there's been a lack of acid available for operations in the States and Kazakhstan, Canada, and so forth. But all of these labs also use acid for a lot of their procedures. So if there's an acid shortage, then that's going to delay things as well. I believe that's one of the delays on lab results globally, or at least in Canada. Further commenting on the SRC situation, initially I was told that they were understaffed. Fair enough. I know what the world is like these days. It's people don't like to hold down jobs anymore. I don't mean everybody, but it's harder to find people who want to stay employed. That's just an observation I've been able to make over the last few years, and that's what the lab was also telling us. And then further in early November, I was informed that yes, they still have a personnel shortage, but now they've also received 4 times the amount of samples within a 3-month period than they received all of the year previously. So they just got slammed with samples and didn't have the people to work it. What can be done to mitigate this situation moving forward? Well, hopefully they can solve the problem on their end. As I mentioned, we tried emailing and calling, and a lot of it went unanswered. I also asked investors to reach out to them. It's like no point emailing me. I don't control the lab. We don't have a contract with them. They try to deliver on their best available time frame. There's no guaranteed time frame. So just encourage investors to email the lab and ask them to get things moving. That's probably the more effective way. The other solution that we have is that we can bring our samples to another lab, and that is something that we've been highly considering for future projects. Yes, we could have taken the reject material from the lab before they even went through their analysis and sent it off to another lab. However, we wanted to keep things in house with all of the same data because we've been using them since day one, and there are certain elements that we need to acquire from them. But now that we've done this first pass drilling, we feel comfortable enough that we can continue drilling on other projects using different labs and getting results from them. So that's what we can do in the future, and that is what we're looking at, just using another lab. All right, so a segue from the lab in Ackio, the other results that we saw, you touched on the clay alteration, so the regional diamond drilling. I think we were very successful on that. We tested about 5 to 6 target areas, and 2 of those are very exciting for us and require follow-up. One of those, we're still waiting on some of the results. There's just a few samples that are preventing us from being able to put out results, but probably come out when we've got all the regional results. Put out radioactivity results. Yes, it's pegmatite hosted, but all of it's also altered. It's hematite altered. There's the quartz hematite breccia system. There are structures in the area that are all running hot with uranium in there. It's that oxidized system that I'm looking for. It's not the deposit itself, but it's a pathfinder that I've seen on Rough Rider, on Arrow. It's not the main deposit itself. It is that pathfinder, and I think with only one hole into that area, we've got potential. I think we've got high potential for a new discovery. And that target area is only 6 kilometers northeast of Ackio, so there's a short distance between the two. And then the clay alteration area, which is the one that we're very, very excited about. We've put out a couple videos on YouTube recently. That is one that has all the earmarks of a large scale Cigar Lake, McArthur River type of fluid system that has just run so many hot fluids through the area, leached uranium, remobilized it, and hopefully deposited elsewhere, because all of the signals that we're seeing thus far with the clay alteration, just the scale of it, hundreds of meters of this stuff continuously, and white clay alteration, right clay types, right lead isotopes that indicate uranium has been there, but the uranium's moved. Hydrothermal rare earths, which are also significant of Cigar Lake or McArthur River massive scale systems. It's all very encouraging in this clay alteration area, and that's our big focus moving forward, even without having all of the chemical results back. Visually, and what we've seen with 2 holes out of 5 so far, with result wise, are just, they're phenomenal. We wouldn't do our shareholders justice by not going back and drilling that area. It's one of these things that it has to be drilled. We have to continue drilling at depth because that's where the fluids look like they've moved to, and that's where we think the redox front has moved as well. That was a lot of update, but that's where we're at and some of the reasons behind the lab.
I want to come back to the assayers lab for a moment and just talk a little bit more about those delays. Generally, this is a pretty foggy area for investors. It's a fairly foggy area understanding the lab process, the different service providers, the types of agreements, the demand, the staffing problems. Obviously, it's a critical service in the exploration sector, but I don't think a lot of folks maybe understand some of the nitty gritty details of it. And then just on timing, it's very difficult because there's a bottleneck, obviously, that we're seeing here, because this is not just happening with Baselode, it's happening with a bunch of juniors out there, depending on what service they're using. Um, but generally, I would suspect that lab services, pricing, all of that plays into some of this, and also the pricing is probably climbing because of these delays, and people switching service providers, et cetera. I'm sure Baselode's not the first company to think about moving to another lab. There's a lot of moving pieces, and then also you alluded to it too in your conversation, that you guys may not have a formal services agreement, or maybe there's a base agreement that's in place, but obviously specific timing on delivery of those results probably isn't part of that agreement, and there's probably hold harmless language in the agreements. And so I'm not even sure if much pressure can be applied other than simply switching service providers, but as you can see, that compounds elsewhere as well. Anything else there is just as far as the actual reasoning they have provided. You said staffing, which I can completely understand. There's a shortage of technical expertise out there in a lot of industries, including the natural resource sector. Has there been any specific communication as to exactly what the troubles are, or is it still really unknown? Or maybe have the NGOs gotten to some of these labs and they're part of the problem too?
I honestly don't know about the NGOs on that side of things, but one of the more recent conversations from earlier this month, late last month, was that they had seemed to have resolved the staffing issue, and maybe that has also been a reason that we are slowly receiving samples again. I know they've cleared up some of their backlog, so things are with the quantity that has gone through. Hopefully, that means that they are coming to an end. Like I said, I've been told that they've solved their personnel issues, and it should be good moving forward, and we are slowly getting results back. Hopefully that's what it was.
Okay. These long lead delays can certainly cause damages to companies. I mean, obviously, you have to communicate that well to the market as far as some of the delays and why they're occurring. And I think there's some things can be done from a company side, but and then the other thing too, a lot of these maybe something in the future here companies need to take a look at some type of agreements to make sure that things happen on a certain time frame. And I do think the other thing is too, Jim, is I think depending on what company you are and what your means are, pricing obviously is going to incentivize things getting done potentially faster. So I think there's a lot of questions there that I think remain unanswered with respect to how these labs might work with a specific client. Obviously, the existing relationships that you would have with the lab of your choice could play into it as well. And then, of course, the staffing and skills, we know that that's a given. At this point, I doubt that there's anything that can be done from a legal standpoint because of lack of language in these agreements, is my suspicion.
We don't have a legal foothold to stand on in this.
Yes, I figured that was the case given what you said. And so maybe that's something in the future that can be considered. Pricing obviously is an issue. And then again, how much a company is willing to pay to speed things up, I think that probably plays a role. And then, of course, just the overall industry bottlenecks that are affecting everybody here to some extent. And then the environmental NGO bit, that was a bit of a joke, Jim, but I could also see how you can you can manipulate on that as well. So I just thought I would add that in there. But probably some stuff that can be done on that, a little bit of work, a little bit of thinking for the future as far as service providers, the cost of the service, expedited service, promises of actually agreeing to a lead time, which my guess is most of them probably won't agree to, but maybe there's a conversation to be had. With that, this ties into you guys evaluating some of those results that you're waiting on and how that would impact your ability to review and plan the next follow-up drill program, Jim. From what you know now, obviously yet to be reviewed some of these results because you don't have them yet, but just talk about what you would expect based on follow-up plans at this point to test for more continuity at Ackio, some of the nearby targets. Is this going to fit for summer season, Jim? What's your thinking here based on what you know today?
From what we know today, we're happy not going back to Ackio this summer. Again, without having an immediate hit to follow up on, and just given how long these results are going to take, like they could still. We're trying to get back there in May. We're trying to get back up to Hook by mid-May, early, and have the drills spinning by early June. So we don't have a lot of time. Sometimes takes a while to sit there and just look through all the data and just find the right system or find where that system has gone. But comfortable enough that we don't have to go back to Ackio. We believe that it's in a comfortable place. The focus and maybe the market, maybe the baseload's performance over the past couple of years has been the market telling us we don't believe in Ackio. So maybe we need to make a switch as it is, and that's kind of been our thinking, is that we have Ackio, it's near surface. We think all the economics behind it makes sense. That this is something that will come out of the ground. But now let's find something else. If we can build this whole area into more than just Ackio, then the jurisdiction becomes a much stronger play than the individual asset, than the individual deposit. And so that was the rationale behind the exploration last year. Again, waiting on bulk of results. We've got 2 target areas from the regional drilling that we're still waiting on the final results from. One of those was interesting initially. I think a lot of it was pegmatite, but there is also some interesting alteration, and that's further south of the clay alteration area that we're interested in. But then we're still waiting on the 3 remaining drill holes from that clay alteration area. We drilled 5 holes into it. We've got results from holes 16 and 17, but not 21, 22, or 23. And those are the ones that are going to guide us. That clay alteration, visually from what we saw, we ranked it as our #1 target area. We ranked it as the highest priority. It was a higher priority to go test out that area than trying to follow up something at Ackio where we've already tested with more than 5 drill holes, and we just can't seem to find the next pod immediately. So the idea going to this new target area, again, visually it was ranked as #1. Now that we're seeing some of these partial results coming back, they're elevating that reasoning. They're demonstrating that they have more to it. It's not just the simple system of, oh, I've got some clay. It's looking like it's all the right type of clay. It's looking like it's all the right type of clay that has been involved with the uranium process where the oxidized fluids have come in into a reduced environment, that and just that intermingling and the roll front geometry or the roll front presence that I'm seeing in this area is very loud and very clear. What I mean by that roll front is just that continuous migration of oxidized uranium enriched fluids as it flows down the system. That's what we envision. We've only tested the upper limits of this thing. We have to test down. That's kind of the important part of these last 3 drill holes, as they provide the final vector that we need to properly focus where our first drill hole goes. So yes, very frustrating that we still don't know exactly where we want to put the exact targets that we want to put this drill hole. We just know the generalized area. These last 3 drill hole results, we're waiting on the lead isotope analysis. We're waiting to see if there are any other pathfinders that jive with what we see already, and that will really be the big guiding principle to kickstart our drilling. We know where we want to go, just we don't know exactly the specific point where we want to put that drill hole.
Hopefully you guys can get this sorted. We get these results back. You guys can start to review and plan that to keep hopefully progress moving here at Ackio, which is obviously the big focus of the company at this point. Outside of Ackio focus this year, are there any plans on other projects in the portfolio during 2025, such as more work at Catharsis, or really at this point it's all hands on deck just for Hook Ackio and getting that advanced as much as possible where you can?
It's all hands on deck for Hook. That's, again, it was more of a logistics and cost effective decision that we get the best dollar per meter at Hook because we have a camp there established already. We don't have a camp established for Bear or Catharsis, so they're move-in operations and move-out operations, which add to the overall project. We want to avoid that. We wanted to, we have 5 million in the bank for exploration, and we wanted to maximize that as much as possible. So the best bang for the buck was drilling for the fewest dollars per meter, and again, that's just Hook. The camp's there. We know the area. We know everything's already established there for us. So it's just, and plus the geology overweighed everything. It all makes sense for us to go there.
Appreciate that, and hopefully we can get some of these bottlenecks sorted and you guys can get back out there earlier rather than later. Some of that's further dependent upon, of course, market conditions and also capital conditions. And I guess let's just talk a little bit about capital structure for a moment, Jim. Update us where we are on the current shares outstanding, the cash on hand that you guys do have right now, and then, of course, major shareholders on the roster.
We've still got about 133 million shares outstanding. That hasn't changed in actually over a year, so we've done very well of keeping dilution down over the last 12 months. We've got about 40 million warrants and options. All of those are not in the money at the moment, unfortunately. We've got about as of our last quarterly, we've got about $10 million in the bank left, approximately 5 million flow through and approximately 5 million working capital. So it positions us in a very, very strong point. That flow through has to be spent by the end of this year. So that's our exploration budget, 5 million, and we're burning basically less than $1 million per year. So we've got the working capital to keep the lights on for quite a long time. I think this year will actually be a very cost-effective year on the G&A side of things. so we can reduce those overhead costs. A lot of our float is out there for retail. We've got about 10% insiders and strong shareholders, and most of that is held by our sister company XXIX, who used to be QC Copper and Gold, and they were the company that lended us the project to move forward with the public listing. So that's how they got involved. They're a sister company with us through the org group anyway. So it's all in tight hands.
Jim, and with the money in the bank, if you guys were able to get out there, or based on how you see things going this year, would you guys expect not to need to raise capital at all this year, unless, of course, market conditions were much better, or you guys were able to get the market moving on Hook Ackio results? Short of that, do you guys see the need to raise capital this year, Jim, or do you think you have enough money to cover off work for this year?
Oh, we've certainly got the money to cover off the work for this year, but raising capital is more of a results dependent situation. I would like to have money later on. We have to spend that 5 million this year for a flow through. We can't save it for next year. And I'd like to have something for catharsis for next year, because we do plan to go back to that project, at least for it needs geophysical follow up. And this kind of alludes to a previous question I may not have answered properly, but we do plan to go back to catharsis in the near future, hopefully within 12 to 18 months. And we need to follow up with ground gravity on that one before we can go back and drill that. But that would be the logical follow up there. And if we can raise money for that later on this year for exploration next year, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do we raise money before we go into our hook drill program? We kind of got slaughtered for doing that raise in the first place anyway. We did a $10 million raise, and then we did a $5 million raise, and the market didn't like us doing that additional five, so they sold us off. So having the cash to move forward right now in a terrible market with the depressed share price, I don't think is the wisest thing for current investors. So we will use that cash appropriately and drill to make the discovery that we do believe is just down dip of where we drilled at this clay alteration area, hopefully. And then we've got our other target up there at northeast of Ackio as well. So we've got two strong target areas that I think will deliver results and transform this company and get us back into the green, get the share price moving again. Again, that's all if that happens, then we can raise money at a higher price. The risky side of all that is, what if we're not successful? What if both these drill targets are completely if they don't yield results and we've burned through our 5 million cash and we were left with 5 million working capital, which is still a very healthy situation, but we would need to raise funds for the coming year. So I think it's at some point we'll have to, but it doesn't make sense for us to do it now. And we can take the risk, we can take the gamble of trying to get that share price moving higher before we can go back to the market. It makes sense for us to take that approach, to take that risky approach, just because it's hard to raise capital right now. It's Markets aren't really amenable to raising capital for a lot of junior companies.
Yeah, Jim, and that's always the dilemma, right? With these junior capital markets and these conditions as an exploration company, these are always the questions and the dilemmas that have to be carefully managed. And you probably get punished one way or the other at some point, because the timing is never ever perfect. But hopefully, with that 5 million that you don't have to use this year, you guys could potentially extend that runway a little bit here if you didn't do a lot, if market conditions in the coming months worsen, which is certainly possible to happen, or if things do decide to pick up. So you have to manage that, and it's always that gamble, right? So, and I'm sure continued conversations, as folks in the junior markets know, as soon as you close the first financing, the next financing is open for discussion. And so, of course, I'm sure you're having discussions, and I'm sure some investors are reaching out about potential for capital raises. So I just wanted to cover that off and see how you're looking at that here, and hopefully we can have success. Hopefully sometime this year would be perfect with some of that flow through money.
We're months away. That's what's so exciting about this. We're not sitting at 6 months anymore. We're a couple months away from getting that drill spinning back up at this project and seeing what's down there. Very exciting times. This is when I get this is when I can't sleep at night, and I think that's really hitting me.
Jim, on staffing and your team, of course, Baselode is part of the org group. Obviously, you share some of those different costs on the administrative side. That's the point of having a group of companies. You're also the CEO over at Metal Energy, which is focused on copper, also part of the org group. How are you effectively managing your time for both CEO roles?
Honestly, it's about 95% baseload, 5% metal energy, to the disappointment of metal energy shareholders. However, again, being part of the org group allows me to take that approach. Just it's very supportive on the back end of things, and we've got people within the org group that can stick handle a lot of what we have going on for metal energy as it is. Metal energy is not a very highly active company right now. We're trying to turn that around, but we've got some very strong and intelligent geologists on the ground for us working on BC, and so I don't have to stick handle any of that. It's very supportive, and that allows me to put this main priority focus on baseload and turn baseload back around again, especially now that we have results coming in to just get those messages done and out there. So yeah, it's this point it's 95% baseload, 5% metal energy.
I think it's important to point out some of that. I mean, we've seen, as you know, the junior sector has a lot of people that are spread across, one or more companies or two companies in this particular case. And, the fact is part time on a 24-hour clock means 12 hours. So if you decide to work more than that, of course, that's how you decide to handle your time plus your free time. So I certainly understand overtime and double time and premium time. It is a smaller company, not a lot of activity at this point, and obviously you have other people helping you out to keep that moving forward. But while we're on it, just tell us a little bit about metal energy, as I'm sure most of the audience hasn't heard of it.
Okay, I recognize all of those words you mentioned, except for I don't know two of them. Free time. I don't know what that is. With family commitments too. No, there's no such thing as free time. Anyway, yeah. So metal energy formed after baseload and after baseload success, and the org group wanted to look at more of the battery side of things. So we're focused on cobalt and nickel and lithium plays. And because of the success, the quick success we had with baseload and me running it, they felt like I was the right person to really spearhead metal energy. And the project that got us going in the first place was this nickel project in Thompson Nickel Belt called Mana Bridge, past producing mine, high grade, but it looked like there was a lot of drill holes and a lot of interpretation was missing. A lot of the ideas on how to find these higher grades was missing. So I like the challenge. I really like the project. I think, I do believe it has huge potential. I think that can be tens of millions of tons of nickel sulfides. It's unbelievable the amount of potential that exists there. And in our first drill program, unfortunately, we launched the company only months before the whole Russian LME Chinese nickel scandal, and the nickel market just tanked right after that and was not recoverable. And trying to promote the company was very difficult as well because apparently nickel investors are very niche and hard to find. They're not these people who attend conferences. Uh, so that presented its own little challenge. But we were able to secure about $4 million and did a hefty drill program at Mana Bridge. And I'm glad that we've done that because we set out exactly what we wanted to achieve, and that wasn't a huge discovery. We needed to learn the system, and we've done that. We can now go back and look at all the rocks and say, okay, we know where high grade mineralization is occurring in these areas, and they look like they're all being controlled by the same structures. Now we can map these structures out. Now we can provide a sinuosity, and that provides us the exploration target to move forward. We can test an idea that could potentially yield in multiple high grade discoveries. That's the excitement for metal energy, but we can't get that idea across. So we segued into lithium brines. We weren't successful with that one, unfortunately. It would have been very interesting, but just unfortunately our drill hole did not pan out. And so that led us to focusing on copper gold, near surface copper gold in BC. We still have the nickel play in Thompson Nickel Belt. That's I'm very heavily involved in that one. Again, it's just trying to get that narrative out. So with the copper narrative being very high amongst investors in space, we think that this current Highland Valley project is what can transform that company back into something in investors' eyes. And then with Mana Bridge in the back pocket, or for when nickel bounces back, as it looks like it might do, not, it's not tomorrow, but it's down the road. Nickel will bounce back. I think we've got a phenomenal project at Mana Bridge that can really, really turn into something quite lucrative.
Jim, appreciate you covering that off. And is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap it up today?
I think we've done a lot. I think we've done a good cover of last year and our intentions and why we still don't have results back. We've covered on the necessary part, and that's what is the company looking forward to, and the cash in hand, drill targets already visible. I'm hoping we've got success written all over us in 2025. Just takes that one drill hole to make that discovery. And based on what I've seen, I can't guarantee a discovery. Just everything I've seen so far is telling us to keep drilling that area. And that's all we can do. If there is mineralization there, I feel very strongly we'll find it. If it's not there, then we have to explain all of these anomalies and why those anomalies are there and not uranium.
With market conditions plus some of the delays at the company and perhaps not meeting expectations of where it started out, today the company has a market capitalization of about 15 million Canadian dollars. Why do you think investors should get on board now?
Because we're undervalued. We're completely undervalued. We've got cash in hands. We've been very successful in the past, and I think we can redeliver that success. We're trading at pre-discovery levels. If you look at what we've done previously, we've raised about $50 million at about 60 cents. So we've done very well of raising cash and keeping dilution down for the most part. The shares have gone into a lot of unstable hands that were quickly to react and get out at their earliest opportunities. So we're not left with a lot of strategic or long-term shareholders. But that's where we can start to clean up the market and realize that the uranium space is hot. Uranium space is going to get better, barring any nuclear disaster, which I hope never happens again. All the tailwinds are behind the nuclear market, which will send companies up in the first place anyway. As soon as that spot price starts to move north of 70 and 80 again, I'm pretty sure we'll see investors coming back into the uranium space. That alone will move our share price. With the drill program that's imminent within the next couple months, and again, we're only months away now. We're not 6 months down the road. We're a couple months away from what could be a new discovery. I think we've got the technical background, technical people who can put the drill holes into the right places. And I think we've done our own due diligence to really define the right targets to begin with that can lead to new discoveries. So it wouldn't be the first time we've made a discovery. So I think we can do it again. That's the value that we bring to investors at this time right now. Just like when we listed at 10 cents 5 years ago. It's all speculation at this point. We're actually quite more informed now on where we want to drill.
And Jim, how can folks contact the company for further information?
They can always email me. I'm happy to answer emails. Sykes, JSYKES at orgroup, OREGROUP.ca. You can email the company directly, info@baselode.com. That's Baselode, Baselode, not LOAD, as a lot of people will commonly type in. You can also follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on LinkedIn. And I highly recommend going to our media section on our website or even to the OR Group's YouTube channel and look for Baselode's videos, because we have a lot of educational videos in that. We like to bring the investor along the ride, that you get to get into our head and see what we're seeing and why we like some of our target areas and why we do what we do. It's not just, well, here's news and we're going to drill here. We give the investor the full detail. You get to see things from our perspective, which I think is very unique and very open.
Jim, thank you for that. Well, look, it's been good to catch up. And of course, we're looking forward to seeing how things go with progress at Hook Ackio in the coming months. Thanks for coming on and looking forward to hopefully having you back in a few months to update on status.
Awesome. Pleasure. Thank you very much, Andrew.